instead of putting money into infrastructure and, human beings and health and education and social services. Let's put them into armaments because this is going to be a shortcut where we will revive again our economies, which is not, it doesn't even make economic sense. You don't have to be a pacifist to argue this, it doesn't make economic sense that all of a sudden Europe is going to revive its economy because it is going to produce tanks instead of cars.
No, and it's absolute lunacy also that at the same time as now NATO countries said, okay, let's increase our spending target from 2 to 5%, there all of these countries are also talking about reducing the welfare state, right? Because you have no money, we have
Yes,
no
yes.
money. But this is a spiral of death, but the danger of course is that it will lead to death outside, right? That Europe again will then use this lethal force that it now creates on Africa, on the Middle East, which they're already doing, right? I mean, the havoc
Yes.
that was created, and including in Libya, of course, including in Syria, and everything around Israel, basically that is burning and in flames, is a Euro-Atlantic project.
Mm.
How do other parts of the world defend themselves from that? I mean, even Iran is under threat of actually being, burned to the ground, although the last word has not been spoken yet. But this is a very violent tendency, and it's a colonial violent tendency that is probably going to increase with the multipolarity because the Euro-Atlantic world now feels actually threatened. And I think it's coming from this view that the world is going away. It's not the same rules anymore as before. The rules-based order is changing.
Well, I think the South has learned that simply thinking that you are on the right side of history after being, you know, after suffering so many centuries and having the moral, the arguments, the moral high ground is not enough. This is what they thought 70 years ago when they met in Bandung, that they were a moral force, and that moral force will change the attitudes of the former empires. It did not. So, what these countries need to do is to develop relations with other powers, both great powers like China and Russia, and regional powers, so that they give themselves a bit more room for maneuver. And that is why I agree that the approach that they should have is to be neutral as much as possible. Neutral in the sense that they build relationships with as many different countries as possible so that they don't let one country, whatever that country is, dominate them. Now, this is what uh, the West, the hegemonic West, does not want. I was in Trinidad recently, talking to the former prime minister, and he told me, for us, it makes so much sense to develop our oil fields between and the gas fields between Trinidad and Venezuela, to develop them together with Venezuela. But the United States tells us, no, 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 don't work with Venezuela, without caring what the impact on the quality of life, on the standard of living of the Trinidad people is going to be. So it's very important for these countries to have the confidence to to develop relations, even though they might be considered in the sphere of influence of a great power, but at the same time to strike out and have good relations with other countries. For example, Ecuador manages to do that. And I asked the former foreign minister, Gallegos, how did you manage this? He said, well, we tell the United States, if we do not have good relations with China, which invests in us and helps to develop our economy, you're going to have more cocaine barons working in Ecuador, and your cocaine problem is going to grow bigger. Because if we do not have a viable economy, what will take its place? Growing coca and trading in coca. So you need to have that kind of self confidence where you stand up for yourself. In this case, Pascal, the quality of leadership is very, very, very important. the relationship between humans and geography, the quality of
Yeah.
what humans are in charge, the vision, the energy, the skills that they have on how to operate, shows that while as individuals we do not make totally our history, individuals and how we behave and how we think and how we operate makes a big difference. Mattei is a case in point.
Yeah.
He was an individual. He pushed the boundaries. He created new conditions which were not there. In fact, after he was killed in 1962, Italy relapsed into being a quasi colony of the United States, even when it came to energy and oil, because the American companies started selling them again the oil that Mattei did not want to become dependent on totally, because he knew that that brought about very limited sovereignty, that other countries will control you. And the best way not to be controlled is to have, I repeat, as many different relations as possible with many different countries, so that you need room. Sovereignty means having room where to maneuver.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you cut yourself off from the rest of the world. That is not possible. But and that is why I believe that a neutral policy, a policy of neutrality, is also a policy of freedom. It's also a policy of sovereignty, because it gives you room where to maneuver and how to operate.
I couldn't agree more with you. Couldn't agree more. This is precisely what neutrality is about. It's about creating options. And if you have options, then it's difficult to lock you in one way or another. It's not impossible. You might still lose all of them, but the more options you've got on the table, the
No,
better it
but
is for you.
exactly. Your sovereignty is always going to be limited by historical circumstances, by geography. But at the same time, try and not have it as limited as possible. Instead, extend and try to diminish that limit as much as possible.